Okay, for those persons that were not able to meet in person for my database class at 9 o'clock this morning, I'm going to do a quick run through with you guys. So, first and foremost, it's preferable that you have a Windows machine. So that way you can use Microsoft Access. You see the emblem for the application itself, Microsoft Access. Depending on what your machine is, yours may actually say Microsoft Access 2016, which is also okay, right? So what you want to do is you want to launch Microsoft Access. Ignore this. This is my personal machine, right? Now, let's just right here is what I did this morning, and this explains the assignment that I gave you guys last week. So let's deal with this first. First things first, when you get into Microsoft Access 2016, if you're on your personal machine, um, this is what it should look like, right? And you click on blank database, or better yet, let me, I'll start from the beginning actually. So this is what you have. And we'll do, let's just say we did new, right? All right, now you want to give it a name, a proper name. So let's just say, because this is a blank database, right? So let's just say you did 123. So the name of this blank database is going to be 123, right? For example's sake. So then you would click create, of course, right? And this is the view that you should have, right? Now, follow me now. You see table 1 and you see all of this stuff, right? You see all of this. Now, for the sake of this class, you're going to want to go ahead and close that out, right? Because you're not going to need that. You're going to end up creating a new table anyway. So let's go to the Create tab. So after you click the Create tab, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. So we click the Create tab, right? Now the next thing that you need to click is Query Design. Now boom, we're on the Query 1, right? Now that you've done this, right, you're going to go over here to SQL View. And you could actually hit the button, but to be sure that you're doing it right, you click SQL View. Now, when you hit SQL View, this should be what you have. Okay? Okay, so you have SQL View, right? Now, is this exact place that you're going to create your queries, your tables, whatever I ask you to create in here. So this is how you get to this point. If you've ever been curious as to how you do this. So this is where you are. Now, the next part that I'm going to show you actually is an example of what we did this morning as it pertains to what you're going to end up doing with the assignment that I gave you. Now, you open up an existing database. Of course, you're going to see this enable content. And it's okay. You just enable content. Now that you've gotten that out the way, right? Now, I'll show you. If you were here this morning, I actually taught you 2 queries. So if you were here this morning, you learned how to do a create query and an insertion query. So if you're looking closely, you see this. We labeled this morning creation grocery. Listen carefully. You're going to right click. If you try to double click with the left clicker on your machine, here's exactly what you're going to get when you try to do it with the left clicker. You listening? If you try to double click with your left clicker on your mouse or on your mouse pad, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get this message right here. You don't want to get that message. Now, for those persons who are still lost, here's the result if you try to keep going forward. Here's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to tell you, and this is if you've gotten this far and you've gotten everything established, it's going to say to you, table grocery list already exists. So you're going to click OK. Now, the proper way to open queries is to right click and then you're going to hit design view. So if you right click instead and hit design view, this is what you would know, what you can commonly call as SQL or code, however you want to classify it. But this is actually structured query language. So I'll explain. We created a table, and this is how you create a table. So we created a table, and we named the table, in case it's not obvious. We named the table grocery list. Okay? So this is the syntax that you want to use when creating tables. It doesn't matter what it is. Now I'll explain line by line. This line right here. Okay? We said, oh yeah, by the way, before I keep going, when you're creating a table, the same way there's columns and rows in an Excel spreadsheet, this is the exact equivalent, only except you're making the rules and you're programming how many characters go in each cell and how much space can each cell hold. Versus in Access, which is what we're using, again, you're making the rules. So this is live. Okay, so on this line that I have highlighted, you have product ID, int, not no primary key with a comma at the end. When you're doing this, this is basically saying that you're making product ID the primary key. So basically you're making product ID the number one ace of your table. So when you're creating the table grocery list, product ID is the ace of the table, number one. Basically that means this is the unique identifier for this specific table. If you look at all the other columns that we created, aisle, item, and quantity, they're not unique. Product ID allows you to say, hey, this is a unique marker for this table called grocery list. Okay? Now, In doing so, you're saying integer, not no. So you're declaring product key, well, product ID as the primary key, as you can see, right? And then you're doing comma at the end, as you can see. Now, the next line, of course, you're saying owl. So you're declaring owl, and that's variable character. And this is the syntax that you write it when you're doing it. So basically, this line where you see owl, it says owl, variable character, parentheses, open parentheses, 15. The reason for that number 15 is you're saying that you're allowing yourself to put as much as 15 characters in the owl section. So let's just say once we get there, jumping the gun, you named your owl Frozen Foods, for example. If one of your owls is Frozen Foods, you do the math with the spaces in that. Is that 15 characters? You can spell out frozen space foods, and you tell me whether or not that's 15 characters. Okay? It actually is. That's the answer. It is. Next part, we did item, variable character, and then we gave item an allowance of 20 character spaces. Basically, if you have an item that is under 20 characters when you spell it out, that's fine. However, whether you have a character space parameter of 15 or 20, what will happen is if you exceed 15 characters and access count spaces as a character, if you exceed 15 character spaces or 20 character spaces, I guarantee you when you try to go to the next part, you will not be able to run this query to create the table. Or even if you do this part right and you try to go to the next part and insert data into each column, I guarantee you it will not work. That query will fail, and I'll show you in a few minutes what I mean. Next line, we're declaring quantity as number. That simply means an integer. An integer is a number, so preferably 1 through infinity. So typically 1 through 10 or 1 through 20 or whatever. 15 and 20 are integer numbers, in case you didn't realize it, okay? And then you want to do close parentheses, semicolon. Now, I'll explain something right here with this close parentheses, semicolon. You actually have the liberty of putting a semicolon under the close parentheses, or you can put it on the same line. It really doesn't matter. It should still run if you do everything else right. Okay? Now, when you do that right and you do that correctly, because this is a query basically to create the table grocery list. Once you run this query right, now let's just pretend that this is the first time we're doing this, right? So you got the code right here. Now when you want to do this and run it and turn it into something, or basically create the table itself, you have to compile it, you have to run it. So you would click run right here. Now I'm not going to click it because we've already done it. So here's the result of creating the table called grocery list. I'm going to close this out. You can just left click this out one time. Now the result of creating this query right here, grocery, that's what we called it, but the name of the table itself is grocery list, so you don't get confused. Now, this tables you can double click with your left clicker, whether it's on your mouse pad of your laptop or on the mouse of your machine. If you double click, boom, you have the table known as grocery list. Okay? So you see the star to the left? We're identifying that product ID, as I said before, is the primary key, the primary unique identifier. Okay? So you have product ID, you have OWL, you have item, and you have quantity. So if you can recollect the assignment that I gave you to do in Excel, this is what it looks like when you put it into action using Microsoft Access. And I'll come back in a second to show you how or what it looks like when you insert data into these spaces. Okay, so we're back. Now, if I would like to point this out for those persons who are using Livingstone College's computers, if you find yourself using LC's machines, this is exactly what you're going to see when you first go in, right? Now, of course, you're going to hit close on this page if ever you see this, okay? Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like, as I said before, what it looks like when you add information to this query over here. So we're going to enable content first and foremost. And just to backtrack, okay? If you remember, this is what the query looks like, okay? So we're going to close it out, okay? Now, next query we need to open up is item insert, okay? Now, I'm zooming in. Now let's just say, based off of, or better yet, let me open it back up for reference. So, just so we're clear, this is a column that you created. Product ID, aisle, item, and quantity. Okay? Now that you understand that, now that you see that, and you're welcome to rewind, you see exactly what I did from the beginning to this point. Now that we have established that, we've created, and I can actually go back here. Here's how I got to the point where I created a query. If you want to go further back so you can see it, that's fine. But basically, to create a second query that I call item insert, I did this. Create, query design. Now, if you're using the school's machines, you're going to get this. Now, the reason why we didn't get this box right here originally when we first started was because this table, that it was a table that showed up the first time. The reason why we didn't get this in the beginning, as at the beginning of the video, is because we closed out the table first. So what you want to do, you see this, close it out, okay? Now you'll see query 1, but that's weird. We did query 1 before. That's because you're opening up a brand new query. Now, if you recognize over here, SQL view, now you could either hit this like this, or you could just simply hit the button and then it'll show up, okay? And this is under the design tab, okay? Now, for all intents and purposes, we're gonna close this out because we don't have any use for it. Now, this is the result of taking a blank query 1 and renaming it. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want to figure out how I name these queries, what I named them, if you right click on them and you hit save when it initially says query 1, you can hit save and then a box should show up and it will allow you to give it a name. Okay? But we're not going to do that because we already named it item insert. Okay? Now, this is how you insert values into what you've created over here, which is known as groceries. Okay? Now, I'll close this out, or better yet, I'll go over here so you can see exactly what I did once again. So, this is the second query that I taught earlier this morning. It is called the insert query. So, we name this create query grocery 2 for the sake of time, right? So, when you're doing a create query, once again, it starts as create table, give it a name, and then you have to set the columns and the parameters for it so it makes sense. Now, once you do that, it looks like this, right? Now, if you want to add this information in here, you would simply, the way that I prefer that you do it, the only way that you'll do anything when it comes to inserting data into this class unless I say otherwise, insert into. So the insert query is as such. Insert into, and then you have your table name, which is up here, groceries. You have to refer to the table name in order for this to work. Now you'll see that this is on the second line. However, if you put it all on one line together, it should still run. But this is the entire query. Insert into, call the table by its name, values. Now, of course, you do open parentheses, single quotation, not double quotation, single quotation. So in this particular case, to break it down, this is the column known as product ID. So the unique identifier for this space is the number 1. Okay? And then aisle. So I'll go back. So for product ID number 1 is how we're identifying this. And then under the aisle section, we said the name of the aisle, the particular aisle that we're going to put in for the information is frozen foods. Okay? Now, the item itself is Red Baron pizza. So we're in the frozen food aisle, so we're using Red Baron frozen pizza. Okay? Now, going back, quantity. How many Red Baron pizzas did you get? 3. So based off of the assignment that I gave you last week, which is due tonight by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this is how you would do it. Now, I do not suggest that you copy what I did verbatim because I will know. So I need you to really give thought to this and be creative. Okay? Now, in doing so, you created this right here. Now, the end result of your insert query should be this. When you do it right, this is what it should look like. Now, fair warning. I'm going to close this out. And it's still over here. Now, let's just say this was empty altogether and there was nothing in here, but all you seen was product ID, aisle, item, and quantity, right? If you had the table open when you insert data into the table, you would see it right here. But if you had the table open at the same time, nothing would show up here. Don't be alarmed. You would simply have to close it and then reopen it to see the data. Okay? You are welcome to rewind this video if you didn't quite understand what I just said. Okay? This is basically what I did this morning for those persons who need a reference point. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about what you're seeing, please feel free to email me at jothomas@livingstone.edu. Thank you.